Jenna Gallagher didn't mean to stare, but the man sitting across from her at gate B14 was crying openly, quietly, and with a kind of heartbreak that pulled at something deep inside her. She clutched her coffee tighter, the paper cup warm against her palms. Around them, the airport buzzed with the usual noise boarding calls, rolling luggage, impatient sighs, but all she could hear was the sound of his breath hitching as he pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. She didn't usually do this. She wasn't one of those people who inserted themselves into strangers' lives, but something about the way his shoulders shook made her stand up before she could stop herself. She walked over and sat down beside him. "Hey," she said gently, "are you okay?" The man blinked at her, startled. He looked like he'd just come out of a storm. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. He was handsome in a rugged, quietly powerful way, tall, maybe mid-30s, dressed in a black coat over a gray Henley, his dark hair messily pushed back like he'd run his hands through it too many times. "I'm fine," he said quickly, voice rough. "You don't look fine." He let out a breath and looked away. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make a scene." "You're not, it's just—" She hesitated. "I figured if someone's crying this hard at an airport, they probably need someone." There was silence. Then, to her surprise, he gave a soft laugh, more of an exhale, really. "Yeah," he muttered. "That's fair." She waited. He glanced sideways at her. "You ever fly in just to say goodbye to someone you didn't want to lose?" Jenna's heart tugged. "No." "But I've wanted to." He nodded, eyes glassy again. "I missed her by 5 minutes. She's already on the plane. I couldn't stop her." There were 1,000 things she could have said, platitudes, advice, but instead, she simply reached into her bag and pulled out a small pack of tissues. No words, just an offering. He took one, then another, and wiped his face. "Thank you. Anytime." They sat in silence for a few minutes. She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. Whatever he'd lost, he'd loved deeply. And somehow, being next to someone who didn't demand an explanation seemed to soothe him more than anything else could have. "I'm Jenna," she said quietly. He turned to her, eyes still red but a little clearer now. Silas Carter." She stuck out her hand. He took it. They didn't talk much after that. A few light comments about the people boarding, a shared eye roll at a guy yelling on his phone. Then her group was called and she stood. "Take care, Silas. You too." She walked away, thinking that was the end of it. Just a moment. Just a stranger she'd sat beside to ease his pain. But Silas Carter couldn't stop staring after her as she disappeared into the jet bridge. He didn't know what it was exactly, her calmness, her kindness, the way she made him feel like he could breathe again, but something about her had lodged itself in his chest. He'd built companies from the ground up. He'd sat across billion-dollar boardroom tables and flown private more times than he could count. But none of it had made him feel the way her simple, quiet presence had in the middle of a crowded terminal. And for the first time in years, Silas Carter found himself wanting to know someone again. 2 weeks later, Jenna was back behind the counter at the small bookstore in Brooklyn where she worked part-time. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid her rent, and the regulars were sweet. She was shelving a stack of new releases when the bell over the door rang. She glanced up and froze. Silas. He looked cleaner now, sharper. A tailored navy coat, expensive watch peeking from under his sleeve, that same quiet intensity in his eyes. He looked hard to miss in any room and completely out of place in the little neighborhood shop. "Hi," he said softly. She blinked. "Silas, I wasn't sure you'd remember." She gave a short laugh. "You cried next to me at gate B14. Kinda hard to forget." He smiled, and it lit up his entire face. "You left before I could say thank you," he said, "and before I could ask if you'd let me buy you a coffee." Jenna's brows lifted. "You flew to New York to find me?" "I own a lot of companies, Jenna. I know how to find people." He paused. "I just didn't expect to want to." She stared at him, heart racing. "I'm not a stalker," he added quickly. "I promise, I couldn't stop thinking about you." He looked nervous, which struck her as oddly charming, considering how confident he seemed otherwise. "I'm off in 10, she said after a beat. "There's a coffee shop down the street." The relief in his face was immediate. "Perfect, so you own companies?" she asked, sipping her latte as they sat in the cozy cafe. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, a few." She tilted her head. "Like, what kind of companies?" Tech, real estate, venture capital. He looked sheepish. I'm kind of a millionaire, Jenna blinked. Kind of, he chuckled. Okay, fine, I'm definitely a millionaire. She leaned back, eyes wide. And you were crying in an airport like a heartbroken college kid. I was in love, he said simply, and I lost her. Her chest tightened. You were married. No, engaged, but it wasn't right. I think I knew that deep down. He looked at her. And then I met you. Jenna's breath caught. I don't know what this is, he said, but I haven't wanted to know someone this badly in a long time. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. Then let's find out. And in that tiny corner cafe in Brooklyn, something new and electric sparked between them, something that felt like the beginning of everything. I should have guessed you were important, Jenna said, eyeing the Blacktown car idling at the curb outside the cafe. The driver with the earpiece kind of gives it away. Silas followed her gaze, then looked back at her with a faint grin. He's more paranoid than I am. My assistant insists I travel with security these days. Are you in danger? No. Just extremely difficult to replace. Jenna gave a soft laugh, her fingers curling around her half-finished coffee. So you're the kind of guy who owns buildings with his name on them? Silas raised an eyebrow. Only 4, her eyes widened, but she didn't let the surprise linger. That explains the watch. I didn't wear it to impress you. I didn't say you did. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. I don't want you thinking I'm here to flash money around. I came because I meant what I said. Jenna studied him for a moment. And what exactly are you trying to build here? Some kind of real-world fairy tale? Not unless you're the kind of girl waiting around for a prince. She set her coffee down. I'm not. Good, he said. Because I'm not a prince. More like a corporate king, he smiled, but there was something thoughtful behind his expression now, like he was holding back more than he was letting on. Something like that. The silence between them stretched, not awkward, but waited. Finally, she spoke. What happens after this? He didn't hesitate. You let me take you to dinner. She leaned back, arms crossed. Do you always move this fast? No. His tone shifted, quieter, but I don't want to waste time pretending I'm not interested. Jenna tilted her head. And what if I say no? I'll walk away, but I'll still remember you. She didn't answer right away. Outside, a bus rumbled past and a couple walked by laughing, their arms tangled together. Jenna watched them absently. I'm not looking for a rescue, she finally said. I'm not broken, I know. He reached across the table, his hand close but not touching. I don't want to fix you. I just want to know you. There was something about the way he said it, like he wasn't selling her anything, just offering a door she could choose to walk through that made her chest tighten. I have one rule, she said. Name it. No lies, no half-truths. If I find out you're keeping something from me, I walk. He nodded slowly. Deal, Jenna stood, slipping her bag across her shoulder. Then I guess you're buying me dinner. A soft exhale escaped him, like he hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He stood too. Give me an hour, she narrowed her eyes playfully. What are you going to do? Rent out a rooftop? His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. I'll text you the address. I don't give my number to strangers. You gave me tissues in an airport. That makes us something more than strangers. She hesitated, then took his phone from his outstretched hand and entered her number. Don't abuse it. I wouldn't dare. Jenna walked away without looking back. Silas watched her until she disappeared into the crowd of the street. Then he turned, pulled out his phone, and made one call. I need the terrace cleared at the Mercer, and have the chef prepare something custom. No menu. There was a pause, then he added, and flowers, but not roses. She's not the type. When Jenna arrived later that evening, the rooftop was lit by soft amber lights strung overhead, the table set for 2. There was no one else in sight. The city skyline stretched behind them, glowing under the twilight. She stopped at the edge of the rooftop, her breath catching. You're not subtle, she said when he approached. No, he replied, but I'm sincere. She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. You said no roses, she murmured, touching a small arrangement of wildflowers and eucalyptus tucked into the centerpiece. I meant it. She looked at him then, really looked past the tailored suit and the elegant setting, past the polished charm, and saw the man who had cried quietly in an airport terminal, who had lost someone and still carried it. "What happened to her?" she asked. "The woman you were trying to stop." Silas's jaw tightened. "She didn't love me. She loved the version of me she built in her head. I think I knew that, but I convinced myself it didn't matter. And now I want something real, even if it scares me." Jenna stepped closer. "It should scare you. It scares me." He didn't reach for her. He didn't push. Instead, he said, "Then maybe we're starting in the right place." They sat down, the city buzzing below them. The food arrived simple, elegant, not overly fussy. She noticed the way he watched her, not like a man used to getting what he wanted, but like someone who was afraid to hope too much. "How many people do you let in?" she asked halfway through the meal. "Not many." "Why me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because you saw me when I was small," he said. "And you didn't look away." Jenna didn't answer right away, but she didn't look away now either. Jenna arrived at the art gallery on West 26th, wearing a navy wrap dress she'd borrowed from her best friend, her nerves tucked beneath a layer of red lipstick and quiet resolve. The invitation had come from Silas 3 days after the rooftop dinner, a formal event hosted by one of his investment firms to celebrate a new philanthropic initiative. She hadn't expected to be asked, but she hadn't hesitated either. Inside, the space was awash in warm lighting, modern sculptures, and champagne flutes. Waiters moved like clockwork, offering hors d'oeuvres on gleaming silver trays. Jenna stepped cautiously through the crowd, only half recognizing the names tagged beside each oversized piece of abstract art. "Jenna." She turned, and there he was, Silas, in a dark tailored suit and crisp white shirt, no tie. He looked impossibly composed, yet something flickered in his eyes when he saw her, something unguarded and deeply aware. "You came," he said quietly. "You asked." His gaze swept over her, lingering just long enough to make her pulse skip. "You look like you belong here. I've never stood this close to a painting with its own security detail." He laughed under his breath, then offered his arm. "Let me show you why this matters." She hesitated, then slid her hand into the crook of his elbow. He guided her through the gallery, explaining how the proceeds from the auction would fund a program placing arts education back into underfunded schools. He spoke with conviction, not performance, and Jenna found herself watching not just his face, but the way people responded to him. Respect, yes, but affection too. This wasn't a man feared in hallways or worshipped from afar. This was someone who had earned his stature by showing up for people. "You're not what I expected," she said as they paused near a sculpture made entirely of broken violin pieces. "What did you expect? Someone colder, more curated?" He turned toward her. "And what do you see now? Someone who still feels everything, even when he tries not to." Before he could reply, a woman in a red pantsuit approached, all sharp cheekbones and practiced charm. "Silas, we need you for a photo with the donors." "I'll be right there," he said, keeping his eyes on Jenna. The woman's gaze flicked to her. "You must be the +1, Jenna nodded. "That's me." "Well," the woman said, her smile tight, "enjoy the art. Some of it's even real." Silas didn't react as the woman walked away, but Jenna could feel the tension in his arm. "That's Delia," he said after a beat. "She's head of operations at my main firm." And completely unimpressed by anyone who didn't graduate from Wharton. "Let me guess you didn't, Stanford, but I skipped the MBA. My resume gives her migraines. She doesn't like me. She doesn't know you." Jenna took a sip from her champagne flute. "I'm not going to fit into this world, Silas. I don't network. I don't speak fluent hedge fund." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I didn't ask you here to blend in. I asked you here because I wanted you beside me." She met his gaze. "Why?" "Because you make me feel like I'm allowed to be exactly who I am." They stood silently for a beat, the sounds of the auctioneer starting to rise from the other end of the gallery. Then Silas leaned in. "Come with me." He led her past the main exhibit and down a narrow hallway reserved for staff. At the end, a door opened to a private balcony overlooking the Hudson River. The city noise faded, replaced by the hush of wind off the water. "This is where I go when I need to remember it's all real," he said. Jenna stepped to the railing, the breeze tugging at the loose strands of her hair. You built all this, doesn't that prove it's real? No, that just proves I'm good at decisions. He paused. But when I'm standing out here alone, looking at something I didn't create, something bigger than me, that's when it feels real. She turned to him, her voice softer now. Is that what you were doing at the airport, trying to feel something bigger than what you lost? His eyes held hers. I didn't expect to feel anything again, then I saw you. The words settled between them, fragile and heavy. I'm not perfect, Jenna said. I don't want perfect. I do sarcasm when I'm uncomfortable. I pick fights when I get scared, and sometimes I shut down completely. He stepped closer. Then I hope you pick a fight with me. I'll take that over silence. She gave a half laugh, but it caught in her throat. I've never dated someone who could afford to buy the entire building I live in. Then don't think about what I have. Think about what I'm offering. She looked up at him, searching his face. And what exactly is that? Something that doesn't disappear in 5 minutes at a gate. Her heart clenched. Before she could respond, the door opened behind them. Delia again, now more irritated than polished. Silas, you're needed. The DeWitt Foundation just arrived and they're expecting you to speak. He didn't look at her. Tell them to give me 5 minutes. They won't wait. Then they can leave. Delia's expression flickered, but she turned without another word and disappeared. Jenna stared at him, stunned. You just blew off a major investor. I did. Why? Because I'm not going to keep choosing rooms full of people who don't know me over the only person who actually sees me. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Her pulse thundered in her ears. I know this is fast, he said. And I know you don't trust what this looks like yet, but I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I'm just asking you not to walk away. She took a breath, looked out at the water, then back at him. I won't. But I need to understand what you're really asking for. He stepped closer, barely a breath between them now. I'm asking for a chance to build something that's not built on status or image, just truth. Jenna's voice was barely a whisper. Then don't lie to me. Not even to protect me. I won't. Their eyes locked, and something shifted between them. No declarations, no fireworks. Just a quiet, solid promise that neither of them would pretend anymore, and for the first time in years, neither of them felt like they were standing alone. The wind whipped Jenna's coat around her legs as she stood on the wide stone steps of the townhouse, unsure if she was about to walk into something wonderful or into the final unraveling. She hadn't heard from Silas in 2 days. Not since the gallery night ended with a car waiting for her, and a quiet kiss at the door that said more than either of them had dared to speak aloud. Now she stood outside a historic building on Gramercy Park, the kind with ivy crawling up the facade and a curved brass knocker that gleamed like it had been polished just for her. The driver had said Silas was expecting her. No explanation, just a folded note with an address and her name in his handwriting. She raised her hand, knocked once, and the door opened before her knuckles left the wood. Hello, Jenna, said a woman in her 50s with tight curls and a no-nonsense air. Come in, Jenna hesitated. You're Eleanor, I work with Mr. Carter, this way. The interior was nothing like she expected. Warm wood floors, books stacked in corners, music playing softly from an old speaker tucked behind a velvet armchair. It didn't feel like a millionaire's home, it felt like a person's. Where is he? Jenna asked. Eleanor smiled faintly. Upstairs, he asked me to bring you when you arrived. Jenna climbed the polished staircase, her heart pounding harder with each step. The hallway opened to a set of tall double doors. Eleanor knocked once, then stepped aside. He's waiting. Jenna pushed the door open and found Silas standing in front of a large canvas, paint-streaked jeans and an old black t-shirt clinging to his frame. His hands were covered in navy and burnt sienna. He didn't turn right away. You paint, she said, stunned. I used to, he replied. Then I stopped. Tonight I couldn't. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Why now? Because I needed to remember who I was before I let all of this become my identity. He finally turned to face her. His hair was messier than she'd ever seen it, his jaw shadowed, his expression raw. I didn't call you because I didn't have the words, he said. I was afraid that if I brought you deeper into my world, you'd see how much of it I've let define me. And you'd walk away. Jenna crossed the room slowly. I've already seen you, Silas, the version that cried in an airport, the one who gave up a donor photo op to stand next to me. None of that was curated. He looked down at his hands. I didn't want you to think I was performing. So I shut down instead. That's not protection, she said. That's fear. When he looked at her again, his eyes were glassy. I don't want to be afraid with you. Then stop trying to impress me. You already did that the day you told me the truth. He laughed quietly, the sound catching in his throat. I didn't expect this, he said. I went to that airport thinking I was about to lose everything. Then you showed up and I realized I hadn't even begun to figure out what I wanted. And what do you want now? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved to a covered easel in the corner and pulled the sheet away. The painting beneath showed a woman sitting at an airport terminal, the light from the windows casting a glow around her silhouette. She wasn't posed or glamorous. She was real tired eyes, coffee in hand, and something soft in her expression as she looked at the man across from her. Jenna swallowed hard. Is that me? It was the moment everything changed, he said. I didn't want to forget it, not the way you looked at me, not what it did to me. She stepped closer, her voice low. It's beautiful. I haven't painted anything in almost 6 years, he said. Not since my mother passed. She was the only one who ever asked me why I stopped. Now you're the only person who's made me want to start again. Jenna met his eyes. Why did you stop? Because I was building something I thought she'd be proud of. I forgot that she was already proud of me when I was just a guy with paint on his hands and nothing in his bank account. Jenna's throat tightened. You don't have to choose between the man she loved and the man you became. He reached for her hand, careful not to smear paint on her fingers. I don't want to be two different men anymore. I want to be one, with you. She stepped into him, resting her forehead against his. Then let's build something honest, from the inside out. The air between them shifted, no longer heavy with uncertainty, but full of something brave and sure. He kissed her then, not like a man making a move, but like someone finally coming home. Later that night, downstairs in the townhouse's quiet garden, Silas led her to a small table set with candles and 2 covered plates. No caterers, no staff. Just him, a bottle of wine and food he'd cooked himself. I burned the first batch of risotto, he admitted as he poured her a glass. Eleanor banned me from the kitchen for 10 minutes, Jenna laughed. I'm glad you tried anyway. I'm done outsourcing my life, he said. It's easy to write checks, harder to show up. I want to show up. She looked at him across the flickering candlelight, her heart full in a way it had never been. You already are. As they ate, they talked about everything they hadn't touched before. Her plans to start a nonprofit literacy program for underserved neighborhoods. His dream of opening a foundation that gave grants directly to creators, no strings attached. They weren't just dreaming now, they were aligning. By the time the candles burned low and the city hummed around them, Silas reached across the table and took her hand. I want this, he said. Not just tonight, I want mornings with you, the messy ones, the slow ones. The ones where nothing happens except coffee and quiet. Jenna closed her fingers around his. Then don't ever disappear again. I won't, he said. Not from this, not from you. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. Good. Because I wasn't done loving you back. He kissed her again then, and it wasn't the kind of kiss that asked for anything, it was the kind that promised everything. A beginning. A life. A love that had nothing to do with wealth or power, and everything to do with the moment one stranger had reached out to another, and refused to look away. And in that quiet garden, under city lights and the echo of possibility, 2 people who had lost themselves in different ways finally found something they'd never expected, each other. Jenna stepped onto the terrace of the brownstone with her coat still wrapped tight around her waist, the early spring air carrying a chill despite the sun warming the city skyline. The morning light bathed the stone in gold, casting long shadows across the potted herbs and the tiny lemon tree Silas had insisted on nurturing even though it refused to fruit. He was already out there, barefoot, sweater sleeves pushed up as he flipped through a legal folder. His glasses were slipping a little down his nose, and there was a coffee mug balanced on the railing beside him. She leaned against the doorframe, watching him quietly. Do you ever stop working? She asked, her voice still rough from sleep. He looked up, his entire face shifting the second he saw her. Only when something better comes along. She walked toward him barefoot as well, her steps light against the wooden deck. "What's that?" She nodded to the folder. He set it down without hesitation. "The final paperwork for the foundation. Your literacy program's getting its own funding stream under the Carter Creative Trust." Her eyes widened. "You said we'd talk about that next quarter. We did, but I already ran the numbers. There's no reason to wait. You've got the plan." "I've got the money. Let's stop pretending we need more meetings, Silas. I'm not doing this as a favor. I believe in it. You made me believe in it." She exhaled sharply, emotion hitting her before she could brace. "I thought I'd have to fight for this." "You won't," he said. "Not with me." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Besides," he added, "I've got a selfish reason. I want to see your name on something permanent." Jenna laughed once, startled by how deeply it moved her. "You know I never wanted any of this to be about your money." "I know. But I want my money to be about you." They stood there for a moment, the city stretching out before them, the world still waking up around their little sanctuary. She turned to him. "Do you remember what you said to me that night in the garden about mornings?" "I do. They're here." "You have them now." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I know, and I'm never letting them go." They spent the rest of the morning inside, barefoot on the hardwood floors, music playing low in the background. Jenna worked at the kitchen island, sorting through curriculum ideas, while Silas paced nearby on a call about a new acquisition. But every few minutes, he looked over at her and smiled like even in the middle of negotiations, she was the only thing grounding him. Later that week, they hosted a dinner at the townhouse. Just a few people from both their lives, her best friend, his assistant Eleanor, a few of the teachers she'd worked with in the past, and a couple of Silas's colleagues who didn't wear $1,000 suits to prove a point. It was casual, filled with laughter and mismatched chairs, and no one discussed quarterly earnings or capital gains. Jenna stood in the kitchen after dessert, scraping plates while Silas poured wine in the other room. Eleanor joined her, drying a dish. "I've seen him through a lot," she said. "But I've never seen him this still." Jenna glanced over her shoulder. Silas was listening to her friend talk, one hand resting on the back of her chair, the other holding his glass. He looked completely at ease. "He's not still," Jenna said quietly. "He's just finally moving in the right direction." Eleanor nodded once. "You should know he turned down a seat on the board of the DeWitt Foundation last week, said he didn't want to join any table that wouldn't make room for the woman beside him." Jenna blinked. "He didn't tell me that, because he didn't do it to impress you. He did it because you changed the way he sees power." Jenna turned back to the sink, her throat tight. She didn't say anything more, but when she joined Silas on the couch later, she curled into his side and whispered something only he heard. Whatever it was made him close his eyes and hold her a little tighter. The next month passed in a quiet rhythm that neither of them had ever experienced before. Jenna's program launched its pilot in 2 elementary schools, and Silas adjusted his schedule to work from home more often, choosing to build a studio on the townhouse's 2nd floor where he could paint again. Not for anyone else, just because she'd reminded him he could. One evening, after dinner on the rooftop, Silas pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, not flashy, not dramatic, just a simple velvet case with a ring that shimmered like starlight. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. "I don't need a grand gesture," he said. "I just need a life with you." Jenna stared at him, eyes wide, breath caught. "I know this isn't a fairy tale," he continued. "I know we didn't start with magic, but we made it, we built it, and I want to keep building it. Every day with you." She reached out and closed the box with a quiet snap, then slipped her arms around his neck and kissed him like the answer was already living in every breath she took. "Yes," she whispered. "God, yes." They were married 6 months later in a garden behind the townhouse with only 20 guests, candles flickering in mason jars and laughter echoing off the ivy-covered walls. Jenna wore a long silk gown and no shoes. Silas wore a gray suit with paint still staining the undersides of his fingernails. He painted her portrait the next week, not posed, not still, just her, laughing barefoot in the kitchen, hair tied up, pencil tucked behind her ear. He hung it in the front hallway, right across from the painting of the airport, so that anyone who walked through their door would understand the story of who they were and how it began. Years later, their home became a place others came to build from. Artists, teachers, kids from the program Jenna started, people who needed to believe in second chances and unexpected beginnings. And at the center of it all always were Silas and Jenna, two people who met in the middle of heartbreak, and slowly, deliberately, built a love that stood taller than anything either of them had ever imagined, not perfect, but real, and forever.